Welcome to the Spirit of a Badass, where we celebrate stories of courage, hope, and resiliency. I'm your host, Alecia Jacobson.
What's up, badasses? Solo episode today. I hadn't planned this episode for a little while, but then yesterday I was in a coaching session and got me a little lit up about it and fired up. So I want to use that energy to share it, y'all. Anyway, today we're going to talk about the power of pause. And the power of pause is extremely important. And it's something that a lot of people don't think about it until maybe they have to, or maybe have never considered it before. It's something that can be very valuable to you in all areas of your life if you start to incorporate it into your world and start small, obviously. That's always what I say. So anyway, let's get into it today. The power of pause. What does that actually mean? It means that it's a space that you can give yourself after you have some sort of event, whatever it is that probably is causing some heightened feelings or emotion. That space you give yourself, the pause, is really important to have and to utilize so that you can respond instead of reacting. That's something I talk about a lot because when we react, we're not really thinking. We're kind of going into our unconscious patterns, behaviors, and we are not probably behaving and acting in the way that we most want to. If you were to write the script, when you're reacting, probably not the best because it's not thought out. So some of the places, I'm just going to run through them where you can use this power of pause. And then I'll share with you, what that could look like in these spaces. So some of them are in relationships that you have. This could be with a partner. This could be with kids, any relationship that you have. That power of pause shows up. For instance, my husband has been gone and is a struggle with as many kids as we have. And because of this dynamic, both of us have sort of reverted somehow back to our how we were 4 months ago. And it's what the hell happened here? 2 weeks ago, we were firing. We were just great. And this happens. I know this happened. But a tool that we have both started using now is the understanding that we can pause this and know that we can come back to it because we are not showing up as our best selves right now. We are not going to say things. We are not going to do things. What comes out of us is not going to be for the greater good of our marriage. So we use that power of pause and we take time. This could look like saying, I need a 10-minute break from this conversation, or I need to wait till tomorrow to talk about this. One of the things that we've started doing is saying, this is really important. When is it a good time to talk about this? Because not all times are good times. And just because it works for you doesn't mean it works for the other person. So getting that buy-in from them and asking them, when is a good time? When can we come back to this? So it shows up in relationships that you have. And the impact is just huge because if you think about it, if you're in reaction stress mode and you're not thinking, what's coming out of you isn't good. It's not quality. It's not something that you're you know what? I'm really proud of that shit. It's reactive and it's red and it's not good. Or it's shutting down and it's the opposite of reactive. It's just icky. So when you can find and come together and have an understanding of, I need some time. I'm going to pause. Pause. It doesn't mean stop. It doesn't mean I'm never coming back. It means pause. And then you can hit play when both parties are in a different space and able to process and think clearly, showing up with kindness in their hearts. My recent thing was in, kind of not really heated, but we were having a disagreement. But this can be with anything. This can be any sort of conversation. That's just the tricky ones. Good things too, where it's this is a lot right now. It might feel overwhelming. Let's pause. Let's take some space and then let's come back together. So that's one way, is using it in your relationships. Another one, and this is where it came up with one of my clients is with emotional eating. And what that looked like and how she realized that what she needed was this pause is we were talking about, you have the trigger and then you emotionally eat. And then later whatever the trigger was, doesn't feel so big. It's like, oh, the trigger might have been a 10 and then the emotional eating, and now it's at like a 3. Well, in that time, it was like an hour time span. So it wasn't necessarily the emotional, the eating, the comforting, the self-soothing from that. There was a good chunk of time between the thing that happened that caused stress and the reflection of, oh, that thing is not so big anymore. So no, I'm not about to suggest that let's just, take out the emotional comfort, because that is a tool that people have, it's a well-worn pattern. So that it takes time to figure that out. But when you look up at that, it's like, okay, if you have this feeling of stress, so what we're doing is we're working on her thoughts about the stressor, all the things that are stirring up the stress response in her, so that need to have that food as her comfort won't be so high. But you can think about, okay, how can you spend that time if you know that when you're severely impacted, like at a 10 by a stressor, and if you just give it time, you're going to view that stressor differently. Just like when something maybe negative happens, you have maybe read an email or something with work, and you're really heightened, that emotion is really heightened by it, and then you sleep on it. And then the next day, it's like, oh, that hits different now. That's essentially what this is. So when you're feeling that stress and the go-to is food for comfort, are there other things that you can maybe put in that time, or even the awareness of, oh, really, it's the food, yes, that is soothing. You are using that to self-soothe. But looking at this time, I mean, can you be uncomfortable in that time? Can you infuse that time with other things? I'm not at all inferring that this is a light switch, that you have this awareness now, and, oh, it's all taken care of. But just having the awareness of, after a bit of space, that pause, things look different. So next time you have that pull to go and self-soothe with food, just think, what would happen if you use that power of pause? What would happen? Lean into it a little bit, explore it, practice it. Just practice. It's all practice. This is not something that is an on-off thing. This is a practice. Moving on from that emotional need to eat, there's the idea of, how do you want to be in a situation? So responding, not reacting. When you practice and you use this power of pause, you take yourself out of that kind of fight mode, that reactive space where you're not actually thinking. I'm sure there's some brain science behind it, where I think it's like you're using your lizard brain, but you actually give yourself time to think, how do I want to respond? Because you're no longer flooded. And when you get yourself into these moments, whether it's at work, I have one client where at work, she would get so flooded and she would want, and she did, I mean, that's what we were working on. She was reacting because she got defensive. And we took this power of pause and practiced it. And after a couple weeks, this didn't really take that long, because she realized, oh, I show up better when I infuse this pause in, whatever that looks like. A lot of people, like in this case, there was some mantras that she used. We did this thing that I talk about, that's, what do I know for sure? Because she was making up stories about what other people were doing and saying, like what their intentions were, which she didn't actually know, but she's getting pissed off about it then. And so she took this space, and in that time, that distance from stressor to responding, she did some mantras. What do I know for sure? Well, what she knows for sure is she doesn't know anything what these other people are thinking. What she knows for sure is that she's qualified. she knows her shit. She has a space at this table. She has earned that. And it doesn't matter if anybody else was thinking anything. She owns that space there. And so when she came back, it was a completely different energy that she came back with. It wasn't reactive. It wasn't explosive. It was well thought out, intentional. So giving herself that power of pause at work and responding and not reacting, that was like a game changer, because she was like moving up in her workspace. And you can't, I mean, some places you can be a little hot and triggered, but I mean, I've never worked in corporate before, but I'm pretty sure that that's not, you know, something you can do. And that is looked upon very well. I don't know. It wasn't for her anyway. So we just did some space and some pause and rewired her patterns and her ways of thinking, and absolutely like night and day difference. And that one did not take that long at all. Making decisions, moving on from that, making decisions. This goes in, you probably heard me talk about human design. I have found out, it's kind of interesting. When I make decisions, one, I have like a gut response, but also I get really excited about new ideas, like really excited. And I will go full force on a new idea. And then I realize, oh, I guess I don't want to put my energy in that, like 48 hours later. And so for me, what I have realized when I'm making any decisions that I'm really excited about, I have to practice this power of pause for an extended period of time. So I am a generator with an emotional authority, I believe is what it is. And when I have this excitement, now I know I have to ride this wave. So this wave is essentially the pause. I know that I have to go from being super jazzed and excited, like, yeah, I want to give this everything, to a neutral space to be able to make a quality decision. That is hard for me, because when I get excited about something, I am all in. But I have had too many times where I've gone all in and then realized, like, I think I don't want to do that. I do not want to do this because it's a lot of work, or I haven't thought it all through. So that is one for me where I just know with my human design, I was like, oh, like that makes sense now. But when you're making decisions, you can give yourself space. Now, for those of you who take too much space, you might have to give yourself an actual, like, okay, by this time, I'm going to have to make this decision. I wouldn't apply this. This is not like a one for you that, oh, this is good, I don't have to make the decision. This is not for those of you. This is for those of you who feel pressured to making a decision right away. Like somebody asks you, here's a good one, to volunteer. And you feel like you have to let them know right away. Nope, you're going to pause. You're going to say, I'll get back to you. I'm going to think about that, and I'm going to get back to you. Thank you for the offer. I'm going to think about that. I'll let you know. Because that gives you that space, because your reaction has just been, yes, this is for my people pleasers out there. Yes, I'll do it. And then afterwards, you're all resentful because you don't want to be doing that, because you've got 12 other volunteer things that you're already doing. Like, no, thank you. So in these situations where you're making decisions, practicing that pause can help you by not committing to things that you really don't want to be committed to. Like, that's a whole other, that's on my people pleasing episode that I haven't even recorded yet. But knowing like, oh, okay, I'm going to start practicing this power of pause. When somebody asks me to do something, or I have to make a big decision, I'm just going to pause, and I'm going to give myself an hour, or I'm going to give myself 24 hours or 48 hours. And then I'll make my decision. I'll give the response. I had to do something recently because I was getting kind of heated with some things. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this 24-hour rule where I am not going to respond for 24 hours. This is my pause here, because I was being extremely triggered and extremely reactive, which, like, it happens. And also, I don't want to be that way because it doesn't feel good. It feels better after. It's sort of like a hangover. Like, it feels good in the moment, and then afterwards it's like, oh shit, like that's not how I wanted to be. So for me, it's a 24-hour pause. But it could be just anything. Like if you're a person that accepts volunteer work readily, it can be, you have a 24-hour rule for that. I'll get back to you tomorrow. And then really think about, is this in alignment with my life right now? Do I have space for this? Am I going to feel resentful? You can fill that pause with whatever is suitable to the thing, the pause, the question you're being asked. Earlier I said mantras and what do I know for sure? This could look like, is this in alignment with my life? And my goals that I have right now, the things that I want to be investing my time in, does this match up? Am I going to be overextended? Or does this light me up? Do I have time for this? So that pause has some space for reflection with that one. It's not like you have been necessarily triggered or stressed. It's just you need space between the question and the answer you give to actually think about, all the things that make up that decision. The next one is your goals. We are in January, which a hot thing for January is New Year's resolutions, which you all know that I'm not a fan. But I am a fan of goals just in general for expansion and growth, and that's just my jam. So a pause point here looks like, okay, so you have these goals and things naturally come up. And are you going to go against your goal? And that's a good place to put this pause, thinking like, is it worth going against my goal? Now, this could look like the eating that we talked about before, not necessarily emotional eating, but if you have nutritional goals, is it worth it? And do you want to have like a pause rule that you have, like my 24-hour rule? Do you want to have a pause rule? This could look like exercise. Are you going to skip your workout? Are you going to do an extra workout? Are you feeling like the pull to anything and having this pause, like, what's making me even have these thoughts, first of all, that I maybe either don't want to do it or I'm going to skip it? Is it worth it? What is the outcome if I don't? Is it going, because one time, probably the outcome's not going to be big, but is that one time going to snowball? There's that quote, 99%'s a bitch, 100%'s a breeze. Now, I'm not a fan of all or nothing, that extreme anything. However, there is something to that. 99%'s a bitch, 100%'s a breeze. If you're committed and then you're thinking like, oh, I'm not going to do this, does that snowball for you? Maybe it doesn't, and it's okay. But for some of you, that that's a snowball. Those of you who have like sugar addictions and things like that, I know you, I see you. If you have that sugar, that's going to snowball because it lights up your brain. It lights up your body, those pleasure places. And you're like, I want more now. So taking that pause, and what do you do with that pause? So that's up for you to decide what you want to put in your pause and how much pause do you need. But having an understanding of the power that creating that space, that pause holds, and not skipping over it, not rushing through it, really knowing that that is an important part of life. It really is. It's probably more important than the actual act that follows it, that decision or whatever happens. Because if you don't have that pause, if you think about what you can use that pause for, and if you don't use it, your life is going to be completely different than if you start using the power of pause for your advantage and actually thinking and being consciously aware of what you're doing, with being intentional about it and responding and not reacting. Like, life is fucking different then. Like, you're choosing all the things that you're doing versus not making any choices and just reacting. Like, it's a big fucking deal. If you have any questions about this, these are one of the things I love talking about this stuff. Or if you see yourself in any of these stories and you would like to get some coaching on this, like, oh gosh, like, yes, I do these things. The whole goal here is that you hear these things and then just have that little tiny adjustment and life is better. My goal is for every single woman that I work with, life is better. Life is more enjoyable. So if you are hearing these things and you are like, oh yeah, I do that, let's work together. I have a Calendly link. You can set up a free call with me and we can see what it would look like. Even if you don't sign up with me, you get a lot of good information just in that call that people are like, wow, like they weren't ready yet. They came around usually, but like it's a game changer. So if this is you and it sounds like you, hit that Calendly link and set up a time with me and we can see what does it take for you to start moving in the directions of your goals and how can we get you there so that you can be one of those, I'm not going to call it a success story, but it kind of is. It's like, it feels good. It feels good when you were feeling really shitty before. And now it's like, dang, like I did all this good stuff now and I feel really good and I'm really proud. Like that's a good space to be in. So hit me up if this sounds like you. And, just go practice the power of pause. And I would actually love to hear how you're practicing this pause. So you can connect with me on social media at Alecia Jacobson on Instagram and share how you're practicing the pause.
I so much appreciate every review that I get and to encourage you to give them because they are so important to the growth of this podcast and allowing me to serve more women and reach more people. I have an offer for you. So each month, I'm going to be drawing a name of someone who leaves a written review on the podcast. And you will be entered to win one of my online programs, the Fitness Accelerator, the Nutrition Starter Kit, and the Empowered Transformation Level 1. So anyone who leaves a written review each month, at the end of the month, I'll be drawing a name and you will get access to that program. Thank you so much to everyone who takes the time to leave a review. It does help grow this podcast, and I appreciate it so much. Spirit of a Badass is a Lit Path Studios podcast and is produced by Jamie Gale and Alecia Jacobson. Music by Shane Ivers. We'll be back with another inspiring interview. Until then, keep your spirits high and your energy badass.